There's one surefire way to make sure a problem gets worse, and that is to sweep it under the carpet, to pretend it doesn't exist. And there's one surefire way to make sure that bullies become emboldened and do more bullying, and that is to give in to them, to bow and scrape. The diplomacy from Anthony Albanese in China and the behaviour of his hosts only leads us to conclude that the Prime Minister doesn't understand either of these 2 points. He's pretended there is no substantive problem with the China relationship, and he's failed to stand up for Australia's national interests. Let me start with the positives. Yes, it is useful for the PM to be in China and to keep dialogue open. And yes, visiting the Great Wall and reminding everyone of Gough Whitlam's historic early recognition of China is all fair and good. But China 50 years ago wasn't a global superpower and wasn't bullying Australia. And there's a fine line between being polite to your hosts and being obsequious.
Here today, of course, I have the sense of history, following in the footsteps of the Labor Prime Minister Gough Whitlam, who was the first Prime Minister to visit here in 1973. It followed the correct decision that he made as leader of the Labor Party in 1971. And that was, of course, at the time when that was a controversial decision to recognise the People's Republic of China.
Albanese needs to do more than recognise history. He needs to shape it. And at the moment, he's just allowing Beijing to push him and Australia around. The Chinese leadership is banging on about free and fair trade, trying to portray themselves as the good guys in the global tariff wars unleashed by US President Donald Trump. And Albanese has failed to push back and tell China that its one-sided and punitive trade policies are unfair and damaging. Instead, Albo just says in China what Beijing would want him to say.
As a general principle, of course, one of the things that I emphasise, I say the same thing in Beijing as I say in Bankstown, which is that the Australian government supports free and fair trade. It's in the interests of the world to have free and fair trade, and we'll continue to engage that way.
And, of course, China will seek to use those comments as praise of China's trade policies and an affront to our great ally, the United States. Indeed, in the Communist government's English language mouthpiece, the China Daily, the visit was written up as all sweetness and light, and the readout from President Xi Jinping said China advocates countries promoting unity and cooperation, an Asia-Pacific free trade area, and liberalising trade and investment and promoting regional peace and prosperity. This is extraordinary hypocrisy and has received no pushback from Albanese in public or apparently in private diplomacy. In fact, our PM only echoes those delusional aspirations. When she talks about free trade and fairness, does Albanese not remember China slapping trade bans on Australia just because we wanted an independent inquiry into the origins of COVID, or we dared to sign up for nuclear submarines? Remember, China slapped an 80% tariff on our barley exports. It banned beef imports altogether from 4 abattoirs. It put an extreme 200% tariff on our wine exports, 40% on our cotton industry, and it effectively banned our lucrative lobster and timber exports. Yet Albanese allows China to preach free and fair trade without objecting to this sort of bullying and economic coercion. Doesn't that just guarantee we'll see it all again as soon as Australia does or says something that China doesn't like? Remember, less than 5 years ago, China put out a 14-point list of grievances, the reasons it wanted to punish Australia. It was a bizarre and paranoid screed. It started with foreign investment decisions and the banning of Huawei from the 5G network. It mentioned our foreign interference legislation and calls for an independent inquiry into the origins of COVID. It also mentioned our support for the territories of Hong Kong and Taiwan and our advocacy for international law in the South China Sea. It even referenced our complaints about cyber attacks, possibly from China, and whinged about antagonistic media reports about China. They even mentioned racism in Australia. And all this to justify punishing us with brutal trade sanctions, not to mention military intimidation from the Sea of Japan right down to the Tasman Sea last year, or earlier this year. And now Beijing has highlighted its next gripe, unhappy with Albanese's plan to take the port of Darwin out of Chinese hands and put it back into Australian ownership. Premier Li Qiang said they hope Australia will treat Chinese enterprises properly and solve problems encountered by its enterprises on market access, investment review and the like. Are you kidding me? China is complaining about market access and free and fair trade? China is a global pariah on this stuff. Half the reason we've got Donald Trump playing fast and loose with tariffs now is because of the way China has manipulated trade for decades. And China certainly punished and bullied Australia. Yet from Albanese on this trip, all we got was acquiescence. Have a listen to this from today and tell me that DJ Handsome Boy hasn't been well and truly Duchessed.
I've got to say that the band there in the Great Hall played a different version of Paul Kelly's To Her Door, of Midnight Oil's Power and the Passion, of a range of songs as well. That obviously took them a long period of time. And those gestures matter. Respect matters between countries. And I think I took that as being a very warm gesture indeed, and they did it very well.
That's all it takes to make the PM feel special, some contemporary Aussie songs. And Midnight Oil, aren't they all about anti-American and anti-US bases and anti-capitalist politics? Power and the Passion? Here's the film clip with the banner showing a country plundered by America, Japan and Britain and complaining about a land of corporate gains. No wonder Beijing chose the oils.
Flat champagne gap in every home, a Big Mac and no one goes out back, that's that. You take what you get, you get what you bleed. Better to die on your feet than to live on your knees.
Yeah, well, I don't know about dying on your feet, but living on your knees is certainly not advisable. Albanese needs to get off his knees and stand up to China. But 10 to 1 he won't.